General Jang Song-tak was executed last year. He was the young marshal's uncle and thought to have been his mentor, the second most important figure in the country. A military tribunal accused him of corruption and plotting to topple the revolutionary North Korean regime. Our visit ends in Pyongyang's victorious War Museum. Special effects and music portray the exploits of the People's Army in their struggle against their southern neighbor and the United States. The latent conflict lasted more than 60 years, and North Korea commemorates the end of military action with a grand annual parade demonstrating its military prowess. Victory Day, as it's known here, marks the armistice in the Korean War. Last year saw the 70th anniversary parade where, as well as missiles, tanks and troops, for the first time ever, Kim Jong-un used the occasion to demonstrate to the world that North Korea had successfully produced its own drones. There are more than 1 million soldiers in the regular army, not including the highly militarized police. More than 15% of GDP is spent on the military. Mangyongdae Revolutionary School even prepares children. For the regime, the army is a source of inspiration and, above all, order, defining the precise military way in which society is organized, a society on constant full combat alert. This is a country based on military ideology. Absolutely everything is literally imbued with combative spirit. A metro system more than 100 meters deep was constructed in the 1970s with help from the USSR and China. This underground space would serve as a refuge in the event of a nuclear attack. A gigantic sculpture graces the southern exit from Pyongyang, where two women symbolized Korean reunification. On official maps, North and South are marked as a single country called the Korean People's Democratic Republic. Just 3 hours' drive along a rundown but wide, spectacularly clean and practically empty road takes you from Pyongyang to the border. This highway with limited access could also be used for military maneuvers. From time to time you encounter army checkpoints where filming is strictly forbidden. Locals wait patiently in line to show their permits to pass through the barrier. Panmunjom village is where Lieutenant Colonel Nam Tong-ho delivers military history lectures for visitors. This would seem to be one of the most important tourist attractions in the country. According to the guide, in this very hall and at these very desks on July the 27th, 1953, North Korea and the USA signed the armistice agreement without the participation of the South. It was a precarious non-aggression pact that should ultimately have led to a final peace treaty, but never did. There are no South Korean soldiers to be seen along the clearly marked military border today. It's said that they keep it under surveillance using binoculars and cameras, while remaining where tourists won't see them. Technically, a state of war still exists between the parties, following the conflict that resulted in millions of casualties and ravaged the peninsula.
소방의 그 방송, 보도, TV를 비롯한 선전물의 거의 전부다시피 미국이 통제하에 있다는 데 대해서는 나도 알고 있습니다. 미국이 진정으로 세계의 평화, 조선반도의 평화를 바란다면 남조선에서 저들의 무력을 하루빨리 철수시키고 이 조선반도의 그 평화 보장을 위해서 진심으로 노력해야 합니다.
Several meters away, a group of American Christians, some of South Korean descent, pray for reunification. There are now huge differences between the two sides, historic, economic and cultural. Even the language has begun to differ. But families living on opposite sides of this divide still try to preserve ties between close relatives torn apart by war. It's a painful issue that's often used as a bargaining chip in talks between Pyongyang and Seoul. Dozens of people from the south, all selected by drawing lots, came to the mountains in Kumpang region in North Korea's east coast in search of brothers and sisters, nephews, and even children they were never given the opportunity to know. After several years, in February, family members separated by war are granted just 3 days to see each other. For many, it's their last chance.
I don't involve any of the politics or any of the religion part, but we just wanted to, this is a one country and this is a one people.
On her second trip to the country in 8 years, Mrs. Lee met us in Kaesong, the next stop after our trip to the border.
First trip was very sad. It was really dark, no lights. You know, during the mealtime, lights go off like 5-6 times. And there are no smiles from people's face. But now I think it's economically changing, but I think some kind of life is coming back.
The differences between Kaesong and Pyongyang are striking. This city is one of the few examples of direct economic cooperation between North and South. The only joint industrial complex is based here. It encompasses over 100 South Korean companies, employing 53,000 North Koreans. Colonel Kim Chang-yun comes with us to the so-called Demilitarized Zone, which ironically is one of the most heavily armed areas in the world.
그것은 조선 반도를 북과 둘로 갈라놓아 우리 민이 영원히 통일을 하지 못하게 하려는 미국과 남조선 당국자들의 그릇된 정치계에서 빚어진 산지하에.
He's talking about the wall erected on the South Korean side. It was completed in 1979, and Washington and Seoul deny its existence, though they do acknowledge there are certain anti-tank facilities in place. This 4-kilometer-wide natural barrier divides the peninsula. South Korea looms in the distance. Seoul is a little over 50 kilometers away. From here on the North Korean side, and using the colonel's binoculars, we're able to see South Korean military bases, flying UN flags on the opposite side. We can also see what the North Koreans are talking about, a 5-meter-high wall stretching from east to west.
장벽을 건설한 목적은 우리를 군사적 공격 출발 진지로 만들어 놓고 장벽을 우리를 쉽게 타격하게 한 이런 군사적 목적이 더 큰 것만큼 이것이 세계에 폭로되면 아주 불리하다고 생각하면서 이 자체를 부인하고 있습니다.
Chang-yong can take pride in just how much trust the marshal vests in him, keeping him posted on the main border and in his 40 years of continued service in the People's Army.
전통적으로 물려주는 변하지 않는 전통은 위대한 김정은 동지를 수반한 당중앙회를 목숨으로 사수하자 이런 신념이 구호입니다.
Revolutionary policy in the DPRK is based on the principles of Songgon, meaning military first, a philosophy that reached its heyday during Kim Jong-il's reign that lasted more than 20 years. The more time passes, the more complex and controversial the concept becomes. A 170-meter tower keeps this fire burning at the monument to Juche. Ideologically, a permissive and slightly spiritual adaptation of communism ascribed to Kim Il-sung. It promotes national and personal self-reliance, or rather, reliance on the masses who are dubbed the masters of revolution and national development. Although the ideology may seem controversial and mysterious, and even dangerous to foreigners, it is constantly referred to. The state-endorsed image of utopian self-reliance and self-sufficiency is in stark contrast to economic reality in the country, which remains dependent on outside help and suffers from an acute shortage of currency. Cargo ships sail into the locks of the East China Sea, bringing goods from China, still the main supplier of provisions and aid received through international assistance. Last year, more than 2 million people in the DPRK benefited from United Nations aid. Chinese goods fill the model supermarket shelves in Pyongyang, alongside locally manufactured products which serve as an example of the country's economic prowess. The closest estimate was from the Bank of South Korea. According to Seoul, its northern neighbor demonstrated 1.1% of economic growth in the last year. However, as is so often the case, Pyongyang has released no official data. Small shops and food distribution centers where local people pick up their monthly food rations didn't feature in our itinerary. We were also warned not to film construction sites, and especially construction workers, many of whom are servicemen. They told us that workwear smeared with cement would give a false impression of the country. However, we were allowed to film from afar this footage of the Teachers' Tower in the capital, along with the construction of a new terminal building and tarmac at the airport, renovation